Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, and with rumors of a remake for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic possibly being on the way, I've naturally had a hankering to return to my baby. With that said, I've seen a shocking amount of comments from people saying that they have yet to play the original, so I figured to make this one of my, I kid you not, 100 plus playthroughs different, I'd actually critique / review the heck out of this game for modern times to see how it's held up. So I promise you, while this is my favorite game of all time, the fanboy goggles are off. Let's do this, beginning with the story. What I believe separates KotOR are the familiarities we expect from Star Wars nowadays that aren't immediately apparent. We see vibroblades and metallic Sith armor as we navigate the crumbling Endar Spire to start it off. Our first presentation of a Jedi is to stay as far away as possible, only to hopefully not interfere, thus giving this impression to the player that it's this far-off, unattainable power. As you make more and more strides towards that inevitable Jedi way of life, it's noticeably dripping in politics, with plenty of personal points of view from the Jedi Council conflicting. This mixture is an almost medieval meets science fantasy, which helps make KotOR so different. Even the architecture, while naturally dated thanks to the tech this game was built on, is created in such an elegant fashion that it screams that these were some of the very first building blocks of the Republic and Sith Empire. So as you wrap up the Endar Spire and arrive on Taris, your goal is to find Bastila Shan, a female Jedi officer who has been kidnapped and tried to escape this now quarantined planet. The goal after escaping is to head to Dantooine to allow you and your team to regroup and eventually chase down the elusive, well-hidden star maps. One of the things I tried to look closely at was KotOR's pacing. Is the beginning truly slow? Something I've seen more and more as time has gone on, and in many ways, yes. However, I feel it's to the game's benefit, familiarizing the player with the aforementioned vibroblades, heavy armor, blasters, and the lack of the Force are all elements that I believe helps ground the universe, and extended exposure to this style of Star Wars, which we don't see much, helps infinitely. As I said though, the beginning is quite slow. It took me about 7.5 hours to get off of Dantooine and begin my intergalactic adventure through the rest of the galaxy. This is accounting for me doing pretty much all the side content outside of the arena on Taris. That's not to say that's when the game really picks up, but all the truly special moments are contained in KotOR's unique way of delivering a story. You see, as you travel from planet to planet, you're met with a form of layered storytelling that I find strong to this day. While your ultimate quest is to discover the star maps on each planet, that doesn't mean that all the many locations you'll be hitting up don't have their own sets of problems. So I may be searching Manan for a star map, but eventually you're invading a Sith base, investigating a murder, solving your own trial for arrest, playing Pazak, and so on. Side quests are abundant upon all of these planets, but each planet has their own individual goals to keep the player continuously compelled, while the overarching narrative with these star maps can comfortably go at its own pace. Now, design-wise, the planets are layered as well. Perhaps it's symbolic, I have no clue, but Taris is a fine example with there being an upper city, lower city, and undercity, one resembling wealth, another hosting many gangs, and the last being pure poverty, honestly. Manan has its own cityscape with a mysterious water base lying underneath. Same goes for Kashyyyk, or Kashyyyk. Look, I have no idea, okay? In the comments, people complain it's one way or another. I'm just gonna say Kashyyyk. While it has nothing to do with the story, do note that this form of world building is a little bit dated. You can hardly tell the difference between north and south versions of the upper city in Taris, and the courtyards of Manan can be a bit tough to navigate, if I'm honest. I just knew them like the back of my hand because I've played this game a lot, but this part of the game is a product of the past, and less loading screens, maybe some more models, could have helped differentiate the area and avoided this becoming a problem. But once again, this is a title from 2003. Now, considering I've spent so much time with KotOR 2 lately due to its upgraded nature and performing better on modern PCs, I almost forgot how incredible the companions of KotOR 1 were, and some of the bold decisions that were made with them that I'll get into here. Bastila is surprisingly egotistical and immature. Even in one-on-one conversations, she fades back and forth between talking down to you and leveling with you, and due to your Force bond, if you're not really experienced to who Bastila is, you may kind of feel bad for your player, but your investment in this relationship is a bit more heightened as it's integral to the main story, and BioWare doesn't hide that at all. Watching as she develops develops and goes through her own trials and tribulations is one of the strongest parts of the narrative, and she still holds the spot as best girl in Star Wars. And that's no disrespect to the rest of the cast, right? Navigating Karth's trust issues, Mission and Zalbar's unlikely bond, Candaris's thirst for war, Juhani's resurgence, they're all incredibly strong. What I found equal parts incredible is how you can actually miss out on some of the game's strongest companions. Look, this isn't spoilery, but you can kill Juhani in the early going, and if you're not experienced, I can argue it's pretty easy to miss one of the game's very best, being HK-47, who's tucked away in some random droid shop on Tatooine, especially considering the price the store charges for him. If you're not aware of who HK is, you may be like, I'm not paying a bunch of money for him. This is just something that we don't see nowadays, empowering the player with a legitimate choice that impacts his squad and the outcome of the game. This isn't accounting for all the other companion-based choices you'll be making later in the game. Things can get real dark, and it's shocking given how this game has a really uplifting tone. I mean, have you heard the music on Manon? For God's sakes, life is great. Now let's talk about the villain, right? You always got to have that guy who's pushing you along. Conflict drives you, and Malak is a great villain. Nowadays, it feels like so many villains are posted up front in that first hour or so just to earn the, quote, bad guy label, end quote, and then disappear until the final boss. Fortunately, the manners in which you encounter Malak, whether it be through associates of his, cutscenes of him aboard the Leviathan, and so on, strengthen your overall goal to take him down or maybe take over. You see, there are story-altering decisions you can make in KotOR, but there are also intermittent choices you make that are defined by a light/dark side meter. If you hassle people for additional credits after jobs, kill without need, and other acts of evil, you'll gain dark side points. Do the opposite, and you'll gain light side points. You'll also see visual changes with your characters. These points will define not only your ending, as well as some character interactions, once again, giving not the illusion, but true agency over your experience. Compared to KotOR 2, it's a little more lacking nowadays, but there's still a ton of power that's truly given to the player. So as far as I'm concerned, the storytelling, the characters, the narrative, everything here has aged tremendously well. Does the same apply for the gameplay? Let's dive in. As your adventure begins, you select from one of three classes, being the Scout, who is privy to things like implants, Scoundrels, who earn the most skill points when leveling up, and Soldiers, who are the most combat ready. You also receive a second defining trait later into the game when you select from one of the Jedi Guardian for combat, Sentinel, who's more based off of powers, and a Counselor, who's balanced between the two. The gameplay systems are probably the worst aging part about this game, so allow me to truly elaborate on that. I chose the Scoundrel, and I gotta be real, guys, it's so horrifically bad. This is because the skill system in this series does need some form of overhaul, and it does increase a little bit of my excitement on a potential remake. So let me explain each one individually and sort of get into why skills need some work. There is computer use, which allows you to hack terminals and manipulate the environment around you, such as overloading droids or reprogramming them to fight for you. Demolitions, which will allow you to either collect or disable mines protecting certain locations. You can also sell these collected mines. Stealth, which is pretty much self-explanatory and something I absolutely never use, even though it does benefit the Scoundrel with stealth attacks. There's awareness, which allows you to detect mines. Yes, mines, not enemies, so essentially it's pretty useless to have. Persuasion is legitimately useful because you can convince people to see your way of things. Repair allows you to rework some droids scattered about the level, demanding less parts to repair them, as well as allowing your droid companions like T3 or HK to heal more. Security determines your ability to break into certain locked doors and footlockers, which is useful in acquiring good loot in the early game. Lastly, from the skills is Treat Injury, which determines how much health you recover when healing yourself. Given that every character has access to this same set of skills, it's super easy to round out your party for what you need, such as letting Mission handle demolitions and computer use, while my character will make use of Persuasion and Security and so on. Everyone's going to need a little bit of Treat Injury, but that's manageable. So effectively, the Scoundrel's access to more skill points every time they level up is almost entirely useless given the lack of use half the systems receive. Now, don't worry, it's not all poorly aged because there are attributes, and these are much more defining and exciting. To understand attributes though, let's simplify KotOR's combat system. It's based on the 3rd edition of D&D, so essentially all tactics are decided by a dice roll. Using a specific attack like power attack to hit your foe for massive damage will also give you a risk of a -3 to hit penalty on your roll. So you can hit them very hard, but you get -3 on that roll, and there's a chance you completely whiff, which then leaves you open. So there are little subsystems built into the game, and with that knowledge, let's look at the attributes. You have strength, which determines how hard you hit a foe with a melee attack and your chance to land said attack. There's dexterity, which defines not only how hard you are to hit, but your rolls for when you throw grenades and shoot your blasters. So this is integral for people who want to either be more defensive minded or they want to be a bounty hunter, a gunslinger, what have you. Constitution defines how many vitality points you receive every time you level up. And let me just say this, as a pure bounty hunter scoundrel in this playthrough, you may not want to ignore this one as much as I did, or you'll die a lot. Intelligence modifies the skill points received through leveling up, so naturally, in my character build, this one isn't too useful. Wisdom allows you, as a Jedi, later in the game to modify your force points as well as your ability to resist other force powers being used on you. And lastly, from the attributes is Charisma, which is naturally more beneficial to a smooth talker such as our character. And anyone can really benefit from this one, considering that there aren't real skill checks like based off your demolition or your computer use. It's usually just persuasion. So I know that was a lot of word vomit, but now that we have the established foundation of attributes, what's wrong with skills, and how I'm building with the weakest class in my opinion, let's dive a little bit deeper. KotOR's gameplay weakness isn't the flexibility of which you're able to build. While skills are useless in a number of ways as a whole, attributes and feats as well as powers allow you to really define how you play. However, while you can play all these ways, it doesn't make them necessarily good or optimal. The beyond obvious route is a soldier/guardian, at least for a beginner. You can also get really creative with mixing stuff like a scout for the earlier game and then something like a sentinel or a consular in the late game. That said, this title really pushes you into using your lightsaber. Blasters just aren't as powerful later on, and understandably some of the game's heavier armor prohibits you from using certain force powers. While I tried my damn hardest to be a gunsling and bounty hunter, I continuously felt the pressure to cave to the powers of the Jedi and just take out both lightsabers. The fact that they have the ability to reflect blaster bolts back with ease gives you a defensive bonus, and you earn the best modifications through the game's workbench thanks to the Jedi crystals that you can discover. The game also pushes you towards dual wielding. While dope, do not get me wrong, I think that nowadays it'd be sweet if there was benefits to maybe wielding one lightsaber versus two, or one blaster rifle instead of two beefed up blaster pistols. With that in mind, this playthrough also enticed me to dive into other ways to power up my character, and I'm glad I did. I didn't have access to the implants of a scout, but I started using things like energy shields, battle stims, adrenals, and so on to keep my character afloat in tougher battles. It led to more management throughout the gameplay in what was typically a cakewalk for me, and I didn't find it optimal, but at least I have the ability to be that bounty hunter. The playstyles themselves, like I said, aren't super rigid. You really do have freedom. It's just that going against what the game was designed for is a lot harder. Skills as a whole aren't useless because you're making use of them constantly, but since everyone has access to them, right, you're able to just fill holes without really thinking too much about the build. So you can be who you want in a number of ways in the gameplay, just skills is the weakest link there. However, the writing also allows you to be who you want. It's more defined by a light and dark side rather than gray, but it's still empowering. One of the standout moments is when you're pledging to, quote, help, end quote, the Jedi Council, but the game gives you an option to lie the whole way through. It doesn't change quest objectives or how characters around you would react, but allows you to get into who you're building as a little more, and I really appreciated that. Lastly, for the gameplay, let's talk about glitches. They are prevalent. I played on PC here, so this one is PC specific where it doesn't let you move after combat. You either have to save and reload your game or just rotate party members continuously to move around. Furthermore, sometimes I couldn't travel to the next area because my party wasn't gathered. My party members would just have this bad habit of being stuck on a wall like a mile away and then continuously running back and forth from where I am to where they were stuck and back again. It's clear this was an AI pathing issue, and it's easily the most infuriating because they just keep going back and forth until you just run to where they were initially stuck and wait for them to figure things out. My last most common encounter was the slow crawling of the black borders that surround the screen when conversation begins. Sometimes they'd like creep in and start skipping in. It was really strange. Not the end of the world, didn't affect my gameplay, just something I wanted to note here for the actual review, but it is showing that there is some age to this PC build and it's not quite as good. So let's wrap it up with the music and the sound. KotOR has a very bombastic soundtrack, but then you have very unique peaceful tracks like Dantooine or Manon that you could just chill in the world and listen to, or you could do some homework to. They're beautiful pieces of art that really help define your adventure. Now, one thing I did notice while playing with my headset on is that the ambient sounds when there isn't music playing or when you're talking to someone is overbearingly loud. Like water running is more like a as there's like really loud music, and no matter how much I adjusted the audio, it was pretty in your face, once again showing how dated it can be. Voice acting across the board, excellent. I mean, there are some reused voices here or there that you're gonna naturally pick up on. It's got a little bit of that Bethesda Game Studios DNA where they kind of cycle out a number of the voice actors, but when it comes to characters who are your companions or main villains, all of them are separate and different. But yeah, some of the NPCs are going to sound the same. You'll also notice when talking to other alien races, such as the Cellcath, that they use the same audio bites despite the actual writing being different. I think this is just to create the illusion that you are talking to an alien race, even if it sort of sounds the same, because what they're saying you can't distinguish whatsoever, so you just have to focus on reading. I think this was a way for the game to allow more writing, more quests, more places to explore, more things to do without having to hire a ton of voice actors. Just someone had to create multiple sounds for each alien race and go from there, and it works really well. Something that has not aged poorly, surprisingly. Combat sounds are also still really good. Lightsabers sound great, blasters sound great, the clanging of armor sounds great. Everything sounds really good. This was a really well-designed game from the sound department, something that I hadn't really appreciated as much. I always knew the music was good, I always knew combat sounds were good, but man, it really stood out this time around. Like I said, when you're taking a more critical look at it, I appreciated this a lot more. Unfortunately, like I said, the ambient sounds are a bit overbearing, so you may want to play this game on just an overall lower volume, and it may just be a slight hum in the background, if anything, and you won't even pick up on it, but it's just something that I wanted to touch on. So ladies and gentlemen, that is my 2020 review for KotOR. It's not without its flaws, just like I've always said, but I gotta say that I still love it as much as I did the first time I played it. What this playthrough sort of enlightened me on is I'm excited for the potential of a remake. I think that while KotOR is an excellent video game, I do see how there are ways for it to improve. Most notably in the gameplay department, things are a little bit slower here in the terms of how you not only build your character, but how you play, and that may not be the most accessible or fun way nowadays. I think the story is excellent as is and does not need to be touched up when it comes to pacing or delivering certain story beats or how companions unveil themselves. I think all of those are most excellent. And so yeah, if you guys haven't played it yet, usually if you just want to wait for a sale, these go on sale for $3, so it's really not all that much money, or you can just get them for $10, $7 each, something along those lines. Really cheap games because they're super old. Do keep in mind that the original KotOR is available on other platforms. You can get it on backwards compatibility on your Xbox One. You can play it on the original Xbox, of course. You can play it on your iPad, your iPhone. The ports there are great. The PC, of course, is probably the most rough version, but there are so many ways to experience this game, so I do hope you give it a try. It's truly worth it. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and for good reason. So let me know what you think of KotOR. Have you played it in 2020? Have you played it recently? Let me know in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Big thank you to all the patrons for supporting me and allowing me to maybe create more nostalgic reviews like these. I appreciate the content freedom that you guys allow me over there. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for your time, and I'll talk with all of you soon. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.